What's up, guys? So I've been gone a while on vacation, but we are back ready to make some videos, and I wanted to show you one of many reasons, the Xtrusion bedrack has quickly become my favorite mod we've done to this truck. I absolutely love all of the options you can do with this bedrack. It is phenomenal. I'm going to show you the AXS or AXS Gate install. There's been some confusion on how to get these things installed, but honestly, it's not that bad. We're going to be adding one on the back section there, but as you can see, gas struts, lots of power behind them. This is an awesome setup if you ever need to get at anything in your bed, but you have the MOLLE panels and things mounted on the side. Let me show you what's in the kit and then we'll get it installed. Here's what you're going to get in your kit. So we have our crossbar, our two drop downs, some end caps for the crossbar. These are the braces that are going to attach those, and I will show all of this in detail because there has been some confusion on the construction of these things and the install. So we also have our gas struts with the hardware to mount those. These are the braces that the struts are going to attach to. You have some extra T-nuts, bag of hardware, and then our pivot set up over here. This bag of hardware is for the pivot construction. All right, and I'll show you where everything goes in there as well, because there's different washers you have to make sure go in the correct orientation. And then of course you have some Loctite for your bolts. All right, so now that I've shown you what's in the kit, the easiest way that I found when I did the first section was to actually build it and then put it on the truck. So that's what I'm going to show you how to do. Of course, you do whatever's easiest for you. I'm going to start with the pivots, which is this right here, these two pieces, the pivot arms, and the bag of hardware that comes with it. So in this bag of hardware, this is everything you're going to get. You're going to get shoulder bolts that look like that. You're going to get two longer bolts. You're going to get 8 of the brass bolts that look like that. Then you're going to get 2 different types of washers, and this is the important part because these washers have to go in the proper orientation for everything to work properly and smoothly. So I will show you that. And then you'll get some channel nuts. Obviously, that's how it's going to attach to the rack. Okay, so to start, we're going to take the shoulder bolt. You're going to take one of the little black washers, slide it on the shoulder bolt. Then you're going to take a pivot arm, and you're going to go through one side. Then you're going to take one of the flat silver washers on the back side and screw it into one side of the pivot. And for right now, we're just going to kind of loosely attach everything. You don't want to tighten anything down just yet. So we'll just have it on there just to kind of, you can see the pivot arm swings nice and free just until we get everything lined up. I'm going to repeat the same thing on the other side, same orientation, shoulder bolt, black washer, through the pivot arm, silver washer on the other side, and then screw into the other side of the pivot. And again, it's very important that you have the washers in the right orientation. So the black is on the outside, the silver is on the inside between the pivot arm and the pivot. That allows it to operate smoothly once we have it all put together and on the truck. I'm gonna go ahead and repeat the same thing for the other pivot, same exact process. So at this point, we have both of our pivot assemblies ready to go. So now we're gonna take our 2 1x1s, and depending on your kit, we have the XTR3, so that's why we have smaller sections. If you have the XTR1, your 1x1s may be 1x3s, just so you know. So just if yours looks a little bit different or you have wider bars, that's why. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take one of our pivot assemblies and basically attach it onto our drop down bars like so. So we're going to take 2 channel nuts, or these are drop-ins, and I'm sure you guys know how to use these. We're just going to slide 2 in the channel. We're going to line up one of our pivot arms. This is where you're going to use the brass bolts. So we're just going to, again, I'm not going to tighten these down. We're just going to loosely secure them. Going to do the same thing for that side and then the other pivot assembly as well. So I'm going to do that off camera. You guys get the idea. That's all we're doing right now. Okay, so here's where we are. We have both of our drop down bars attached to the pivot assemblies. Now, what I'm gonna do here, and again, this you're gonna have to do this at some point. I just found it easiest to do this next. Now I am gonna tighten down the hardware, and what I'm gonna do, if you look, what I found easiest here was the brass bolts are a 1/4 inch Allen, okay, or hex. I'm gonna go ahead and tighten one of those down, and I'm gonna show you why. Now with one of those brass bolts tightened down, we're gonna go ahead and tighten down the two silver, which is a 3/16, the two silver shoulder bolts. And the reason we tighten that one brass bolt down is when you go to tighten the shoulder bolts, by tightening that brass bolt first, I'm gonna show you what's gonna happen. So we'll get that side nice and snug. Now when you go to tighten the other side, just because of, see how the pivot wants to spin? So by tightening one of those brass bolts, it allows you to, it's gonna spin, but it's gonna hit, hopefully that makes sense. It's gonna hit this other side, so now we can tighten it down and it's not gonna go anywhere. So basically, if you try to tighten the shoulder bolts without doing that, it's gonna spin, it's gonna pop up. Trust me, I fought with it for a couple minutes until I realized that, you know, that's an easy way to do it. This just allows you to get those shoulder bolts nice and tight. Now we can go back and undo with the 1/4 inch. Gonna loosen that one back up so we can then slide. Whoops, that's gonna be an outtake. All right, so that just goes to show you not everything goes smoothly for the YouTubers, even though it looks good in the end. So basically what I was saying was, now that we have the shoulder bolts tightened and we loosen that brass bolt back up, you can now slide this up and down to give you a slight gap, if you can see, in between the pivot and that in there. Now that little bit of a gap, that's up to you. On the first one, I gave it basically, I don't even know, maybe about 1/4 inch. It just kind of fit what I wanted to do there. So that's about the gap I'm gonna leave, if you can see right in there. So now with that done, now I am gonna go ahead and tighten down the 4 brass bolts with the 1/4 inch. Repeated the same process on the second one so you can see the gaps are equal. Just make sure, that's kind of important, obviously, once we get it all put together. You want everything lining up. So just make sure those two gaps are equal, whatever they are. Make sure they're the same on both drop down bars. Now we're gonna take our crossbar, end caps are intact. We're gonna lay it flat on our table, and we're gonna take our 2 pivot arm assemblies and we're gonna put them on top of the crossbar. These are gonna attach to the crossbar using these silver brackets. Okay, so we're basically gonna go one on each side, one here, one there, one here, one there, obviously using the T-nuts. And I'm going to use the silver bolts that they send for this part. They're basically the same thing as the brass bolt. They're just silver. It kind of matches the silver brackets. So if you come in here, I'll show you. So basically we already have a T-nut lined up, one there. So we're just going to screw that down into that T-nut and then another bolt through to attach it like that. We're going to do it in all 4 spots, and that's how you're going to secure the pivot arm assemblies to the crossbar. Okay, so we have our 2 pivot arm assemblies attached to our crossbar, and you can see how it's done. Again, using these silver brackets. Everything is still loose because you want to be able to move it up and down, side to side, to get everything lined up. So on my first one that I did, it was a little bit of trial and error, but now that I've done one, I know exactly where I want my brackets to be. You can see I have the edge of my silver brace all the way over to the edge of the cap, and there's a reason for that. You may be able to slide it over a little bit more if you want. Again, this doesn't have to be exact. Just when I did the first one, that seemed to work the best when I was lining everything up. So now that we have it where we want it side to side, I'm gonna go ahead and tighten down the 2 bolts that are holding these 2 here so it doesn't move side to side on me. Same thing over here. I'm gonna come right to the edge of the cap there. So same thing as the other side, and I'm just going to tighten down the same 2 bolts. Okay, so with those tightened down, they're no longer going to slide side to side. They're locked in where we want them, but now they still go up and down. So again, this is personal preference. However you want the crossbar to be positioned as far as height. When I did the first one, I ended up coming with about 3.5 inches. So what I did was I took my woodworking square and I want about 3.5 inches. So right about there, you can see 3.5 inches from here to here. And again, that's personal preference. You do whatever height or length you want for your setup, but that's where I want mine. That's what worked best for me. So I'm gonna go ahead and tighten the other 2 silver bolts on the sides, because that's gonna lock it in so it won't move on me up or down. Same thing on this side, 3.5 inches. You do want that measurement to be exactly the same on both sides. Okay, so this is what you should have in hand. Bolts are tightened down, everything is good to go at this point. Now we're gonna stop assembly on this. We're gonna go over to the truck and I'm gonna show you what you have to do to get the truck or the rack prepared to mount this up there. All right guys, we ran out of time last night, so here we are the following day, hence the outfit change. We're gonna come over to the truck here. Basically what we have to do is we have to remove the molly panels, because we're gonna take this crossbar and slide it up top. So I'm just gonna go ahead and remove these 4 bolts that hold the molly panels on. Molly plates are off. Now we're on the back side of this crossbar. Basically what we have to do, as I mentioned, we have to take this and put it up top, and you'll see why. So it's held on by these 2 square plates. All we have to do, we don't have to remove all 8. We only have to do 2 here and 2 here. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and loosen these 2. And these 2. So basically the outermost 4. We'll go ahead and take those off. With those 4 removed, you can now see, that's why we only had to remove those 4 and not the other ones on the inside. Okay, now all we're gonna do is take it, and it's gonna come up here and run across. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the channel nuts that were in here, holding it on the side, or I'm sorry, these bars here, and we're just gonna remove those channel nuts, put them up here, and screw it in place up on top. Okay, so you can see the 4 that we removed, we have back up here underneath now. So all we did was take that sidebar, move it up here, but I don't have them tightened down. Now it's a snug fit because it's supposed to be. So, but you can see, you know, if I have to tap it forward or anything like that, you don't want to tighten those 4 bolts that we removed down just yet until we get everything kind of in position, make sure it's all lined up and the angles are good, which you'll see what I mean in a second. So just wanted to point that out. It's secured up here. The 4 bolts we removed are now in place up underneath, and they're just not tightened. Those 4 are not tightened down just yet. Now you're going to take 2 more channel nuts and put them on this side. So we're going to put 1 somewhere in that direction. We can move them to get them exactly where we need them in a second, and then 1 over on this side. Now we're going to take our assembly and the 2 pivots, the 2 longer bolts that you had in your kit, that's how we're going to secure to these channel nuts. So we just have to kind of get it lined up. I apologize, I'm probably going to be in the way of the camera right now, but I just want to line it up so I can see the channel nut in through the pivot. Make sure it's lined up correctly. And take one of my longer bolts, and I just want to get this started to secure my assembly to the rack. Okay. All right, so both of them caught. So now we basically just want to get it nice and centered. So just eyeing up the gap in between here, and same thing on the other side. Just get it nice and centered. And again, this is why you don't want to tighten anything down just yet. Even this top bar here. You want everything kind of nice and loose at this point, you know, just so you can get everything lined up and squared away where you want it. Once you have the assembly centered, you can now go ahead and tighten down these 2 bolts. We will not be moving them anymore from this point forward. Now, before we go any further, the next thing you want to make sure is you line up is, okay, the top brace that we had up there, the 4 black bolts that I did not tighten down yet, you want to make sure that this angle, if you're OCD like me, is matching the angle of this bar. So you want your pivot to be basically even with this. That's why we didn't tighten down that top bar yet. If it's off or if you need to adjust it, go ahead and slide your top bar in or out, wherever you need to do it. And then once that's done and you're happy with this angle, then you can go ahead and tighten down that top bar. So it looks like I'm gonna be pretty happy. Hopefully you can see that on the camera, how it's literally just about dead on, flush there. So with that being the case, that tells me my top bar is in the proper position. I'm gonna go back up and tighten the top bar down, and then we're just about done. All we have left to do is put the hinges on. All right, guys, to attach the struts, it does take some trial and error, but basically all you're doing is you're gonna take these silver mounts right here. You're gonna put them, so you can see how the other side that I already finished off camera, how it lines up. But when you're working on yours, you're gonna want one here, and I have it loose. You want them loose right now because when we attach the strut, we wanna be able to adjust as needed. You want one here, and if you can look, you see how the pin is facing that way on that one? Down here, you want the pin facing in to attach the strut to. Okay, and to tighten the pin and that nut on the back, you're gonna use a 14 on the nut side and then a 12 on the pin side. Okay, and then just go ahead and tighten that down nice and secure. Okay, once we have the two pins secured, we can take our strut, and you want to do it in this orientation with the skinny shaft down, facing down. All right, so we're just going to go ahead and pop it on, lift up the gate, pop on the lower end, and now we can close it and see if we're happy with how it's sitting in the open and the closed position. So I think we're gonna want, yeah, we're gonna wanna lift this up a little bit. So we're gonna, again, that's why you want the two silver brackets loose. So what you can do is, so you don't damage anything, we can try to take a towel and bump it up a little bit, like so. I'm actually just gonna line mine up with, basically, I know that's set up how I want it. So you can get a good look at how this side is. I'm just gonna line mine up, same orientation, and make sure it works and fits properly. All right, guys, so we have them adjusted. Again, when I did that side, it took a lot of trial and error, you know, moving these, the two pins or the two brackets, top and bottom ones. We did have to adjust them till we found them and got them just right. So I know that side is good, so I just lined them up, you know, the same thing. And now you can see how it works. Push it open, the gas strut takes over and brings it up. And then when it comes down, locks in place. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and get this strut on and we'll be just about done. And I'll give you a good look, a quick walk around at the entire project. Again, just so you can get a feel for what goes where, and you know, you won't have any questions on this install. It's really not that hard once you know and figure out where everything goes. Final look at how it sits on the truck. We have that side open, of course. This is the side we just put on that's closed. You can see we have the channel nuts right there to put our molly panels back on. Basically, I'm going to be putting the two molly panels back on, and I have another box that's going to be going on the side. Those two sides are going to be identical. All right, so last look at how everything sits. The only other thing that I'm going to go back and do, now you'll probably do this while you're installing, you do want to use Loctite on your bolts. They do supply that. Just one last look at the back side there, how everything sits and is lined up. But yeah, you do want to use Loctite on these bolts. I didn't do it throughout the install, honestly, just because I was focusing on making sure I explain everything properly, because there's been a lot of confusion on these things and how they go together, excuse me. But I am going to go back and put Loctite on all my bolts just to lock them down. And I did use it on the other side that I did off camera. So I'll go back and do that, and the install will be finished up. All right, guys, here's a look at the finished product. Both gates are finished, molly panels are all on, boxes are mounted. If you have any questions on anything I showed you, let me know. Put them down below. I'll help you out the best I can. The biggest tip I can give you when you're installing these, don't tighten your bolts down on a particular step or a particular section until you know that section is exactly where you want it. It's centered, everything is working you know, smoothly and everything. Just don't tighten your bolts down until you're positive. If you follow the steps that I showed you in this video, honestly, it's not hard at all. That's what worked best for me anyway, the steps that I showed you, and, you know, doing them in the order that I showed you. So when it comes to opening these things, obviously the biggest advantage to running these things is if you need to get into your bed from the side. You still have full access to your whole side panel here to mount boxes, boards, whatever you want to mount. But yet if you need to get into the side of your bed, open these things up and you have full access to the side of your bed. Now, as you saw, the struts that come with this kit, Xtrusion Overland, really, it's perfect. They hit the nail on the head with the amount of pressure, or the strength of the struts, I should say. When these things are closed, these are not going to pop open on you. I don't care what kind of wheeling you're doing, off-road, I don't care what you're doing. These are not going to swing open. Those gas struts are more than strong enough to hold it closed, but yet, as you can see, with two hands, they very easily will open up. And then when they're open, obviously, you know, they're nice and strong up there. So I'm not sure of the weight capacity. I'll see if I can find that out for you, like how much they can lift. I'll find that out, and hopefully I'll put it on the screen for you if I can find that answer easily. All right, but again, these struts are just the perfect amount of tension for these AXS gates. I absolutely love them. So stay tuned. We already have a couple more products on the way, including our tent. We have our SkyCamp, our iCamp or SkyCamp 3.0 on the way. That's going to be going up on top. Can't wait to start using that on weekend getaways. And then we also have a couple more products on the way from Xtrusion Overland, more additions to this rack. This rack has hands down become my favorite addition out of everything we've done to this truck, which if you've been around the channel, you know we have not wasted time on this build. We've done a ton to this thing. This bed rack is hands down my favorite addition. It is just so versatile. I cannot wait to show you what I have pictured in my head and what I have planned out and mapped out to turn this bed rack into. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Any questions on these gates, put them down below. We'll get them addressed for you. Thanks for watching as always, and we will see you on the next video.